Hey, thanks for tuning in today. So there's been some conversation in our videos talking about some engine problems that we had once or twice, and there's been some other conversations outside of the videoing where people have been kind of curious what those problems were. So I'm going to take a little time today and break that down for you. So thanks for joining us. So a little bit of context. So our boat is a 1985 Endeavor 51, and her engine is the original engine to the boat, and it is a 1985 Perkins 4236 marine diesel engine. They're fantastic engines in the sense that they're easy to maintain, they don't have any electronic parts to them, they're easy to source parts, fairly easy to work on, and you can basically rebuild these engines indefinitely. So it's like the old Timex commercials. They'll take a licking and keep on taking. So they're great engines, and for marine purposes they're really good too, because they deliver a lot of their torque and horsepower at low RPM, so you don't have to throttle up and burn a whole lot of gas to push your boat through the water, which is really useful. So that's the engine that we have. But what happened to us is during our crossing from Texas to Gulfport, as we were after we stopped to get fuel, as you saw in one of the earlier videos at Grand Isle, we noticed that we were having a little trouble with the engine once we started up the Mississippi. Now, kind of an important thing to note, the reason why we knew we were having trouble is I keep meticulous records about how much fuel I put in the engine, how many hours it ran. I do the math every time on how many gallons per minute we had burned. And so as we're moving along, one of the things I do when we're underway, whether it's sail or engine, is I go below and I make certain checks every hour, every couple hours. It just depends on what we're doing and the frequency that I feel it needs. And among those is I check the temperature with a visual temperature gun so that I don't have to rely solely on the gauge. I inspect the engine visually, I listen for any sounds, I check the bilge. There's a bunch of things that I do. But one of the most important things is you check the fuel gauge. And things had been going really well. But as we started the Mississippi River, we had just filled up on fuel on the port tank, and it should be 55 gallons. But I noticed as we were moving up the Mississippi River a few hours later, that engine or that fuel tank was almost empty. That shouldn't be happening. So Thomas and I took our jerry cans and used the system that we use to refuel underway from the jerry cans, which is essentially a siphon, so that if the boat's moving or rolling or the wind is blowing, we're not trying to mess with a funnel and a nozzle that could splatter fuel everywhere or spill it. So it's a siphon that goes down in the fuel tank and down in the fuel can, and we're able to just transfer it over regardless of the sea conditions. As long as it's not raining into the fuel tank, we can refuel. So Thomas and I started putting fuel in, and we ended up putting 25 gallons of fuel into the engine that should not have used that much. And again, I checked the fuel gauge again, and it was nearly empty. And at this point, we're 5 miles up the Mississippi River approximately. And so I made the decision based on some quick math I did in my head on what the burn rate was for the fuel and the rate we were going through it, and the amount of what I was starting to get white smoke out the back of the boat. I made the decision that I didn't think we were going to be able to make it all the way to our last bailout marina, which is one of the things you plan along a passage, is various spots that if something goes bad, you can stop and bail out at these little safe harbors. So we had one picked out up the Mississippi River just in case, but we weren't even going to make it to that because of the fuel rate, and we are going upstream. So I made the decision that we pulled off onto the bank of the river and did an emergency deployment of the anchor. There was some drama involved in that, just with large ships coming through. We got pulled off anchor once, and we were trying not to run the engine. But overall, it went pretty well. And what we found out once we got into Louisiana, into the marina, was the engine had blown its head gasket and the injectors were fouled. So we had a couple of problems to fix, and that's why we were in Louisiana for 3 weeks. Is our mechanic had to come from New Orleans all the way down to where we were in Venice, and that's 2 hours one way. So you can, and it's over a lot of bridges. So with the storm that happened, he wasn't able to get to us for almost a week, and then it took about 2 weeks to rebuild the injectors, to remachine the head, get new head gaskets and everything ordered and delivered. So we had to completely disassemble the top half of the engine and do that. We had to rebuild the head. We had to install new head gaskets. We had to get the injectors refurbished, and that took a long time going back and forth to New Orleans to get that done. So that's why we were there for 3 weeks. But even as we were preparing to leave, we noticed that the engine still appeared to be overfueling. So we got it adjusted, and again, that's because after we had done all the work on the engine, it was getting great compression, and then the fuel pump wasn't set right for that, so we had to adjust the injector pump. Anyway, we left and we got to Gulfport, Mississippi, as you've seen already in previous videos. And when we got to Gulfport and we filled back up on fuel, I did the same thing I always do, and I calculated the burn rate of fuel, and it was still too high. So I reached back out to our mechanic that we used in New Orleans, Chris at Gulf Solutions. Fantastic guy, great operation that he's got going. This is not a sponsorship, but I got to give him a shout out because this guy really stands behind his work. And he told us, he said, if you have any problems with your engine, he said, I'll continue to take care of you if you need me. And he's been great. He really did. He stands by his work. So we reached back out to Chris, and he and I had a conversation about it over the phone. And we decided that the injector pump was likely needing to be rebuilt. So he drove from New Orleans to Gulfport, Mississippi, and we pulled the injector pump off and we sent it off to get it rebuilt. That took some time. And once it was done and it was rebuilt, we got it back on the boat. We had to reinstall it, which if you've ever done this, there's a lot of fuel line work you have to do. And every time you make a major adjustment, you have to re-bleed the fuel line. So it just took time. And we got all that done. We got the engine running great. It was fueling where it was supposed to be fueling. And we decided to leave and start moving towards Pensacola. So one of the things that we had also noticed prior to leaving Louisiana was the heat exchanger had a small leak on a gasket, but it was manageable. Well, we had made a temporary gasket for it, and it was holding pretty well. But after we had gotten to Gulfport and we got everything situated and we were ready to go to Pensacola with the new injector pump and pretty much the top half of the engine being completely rebuilt. It's a whole brand new fuel system at this point. And she runs great. But as we head out, I noticed about an hour or two underway that we suddenly are getting a lot of water in the bilge because I could hear the bilge pump turn on. And I go down as I'm doing my checks, and I noticed that the gasket on the heat exchanger had started to fail and was spraying large amounts of seawater onto the engine and down into the engine compartment and into the bilge. So I turned this around because we probably could have made it, but it's one of those things that you just don't gamble with the lives of your family and your boat. And it was just the best idea. This play it safe. So if that gasket had completely failed, we may not have made it back to the marina under power and would have had to call for a tow. And I didn't want to do that. So we just went ahead and turned around, went right back to the marina there in Gulfport. And I went and got the materials I needed and built a brand new gasket for it, got it all put together. So with the new gasket for the heat exchanger, the whole brand new fuel system, the new head gasket, all the new top seals, and the rebuilt fuel injectors on the engine, she's running really well now. And we're really impressed with the gas mileage that she's getting. She runs pretty good, runs a lot cleaner than she did. So that, in a nutshell, is what's been going on with the engine. And we do believe, knock on wood, that we finally have it sorted and we're good to go. And that's going to be important because we think there may be some motoring in our future again, as much as we don't like it. But that's pretty much in a nutshell. That sums up what happened with the engine. We've got it running where we want it now. She's running great. It's all cleaned up, and we're ready to rock and roll. So for those that were wondering what's going on with this engine and do we want to get it replaced, no, it's fine the way it is. We've got it fixed. It's looking good. We're okay. But it's just one of those things that you really don't know what works and what doesn't work on a boat, especially a 40-year-old boat, until you really take it out offshore for multiple days in a row and really put that vessel through its paces. That's when you find out what's good and what's not.
Thanks, bilge pump.
So thanks for tuning in and watching this video. I try not to get too technical and to not nerd out too much on the engine. I really want to, but I've restrained myself. So thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe and follow us so you can find out where we're going next. We appreciate y'all, everyone here. Thanks.